And it's that piece that actually segues into the conversation tonight. And with us to help us discuss this, look at the state of the nation, are two gentlemen. First, we have Elkana Mogaka. Elkana is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. Karibu sana. And we also have Mr. Newton Khamasi. Newton is a leadership and governance expert. Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
First of all, gentlemen, talk to me about where you stand, from where you sit. What did you make of the deployment of the KDF to begin with? Away from the ruling, just right at the moment when the tanks and the armored vehicles were rolling into the capital city. What did you make of that? Starting with you, Mr. Khamasi.
Thank you so much, Victor, for having me here, first of all. And just before I begin, I just want to send my personal condolences to the families that lost their youngful ones in the process of protests. And our hearts go out to them. May they get the strength to overcome this terrible moment. In regards to the deployment of KDF, you know, as a country, there are stretches where some activities might happen and there are decisions that have to be made. In a leadership structure, there's that point when you get and you say, no, this is too much. Because what we noted in the previous protests that have been happening, they have been peaceful, they were well organized, but it got to a point where you saw some hooliganism getting into it, of which, yes, those are opportunist people who thought like they can come and infiltrate the noble journey that the young people, the Gen Z generation, was up to achieve. Mm-hmm. And because of that, as a president, I believe if anyone will be in his position, will take the drastic decision, because this was a threat to the sovereignty of a country. And the only institution that can help a nation protect that aspect is the KDF. Probably the process was hastened, but as we see it, even the ruling that you have just aired right now, it is not stopping it. It's only that it's giving guidance that the government of the day, or the CS, should continue and give specifications on the mandate and the area of coverage and the duration that the KDF will be outside there to protect the sovereignty of the country. Because as we saw, Parliament being attacked the way it was attacked, Victor, it was a threat to the nation, not only to the institution, but to a nation. Because it got to a point, I believe that we got people who infiltrated the demonstration, and in the wisdom of the head of state, I believe he did the right thing to do that.
All right. Mr. Mogaka, what are your thoughts? The armored vehicles are rolling into the capital city. We're seeing a different kind of weaponry now rolling into the capital city. What are your thoughts at that initial moment?
A number comes to mind, 62. When you are present at home, when you are with the people who are going through whatever they are going through, you can anticipate this kind of a thing happening. You can anticipate how intense the protests or how disenfranchised the people feel. From the time we left COVID-19, which happened to be the worst economic disruption this country has ever felt all the world over, we all looked to find someone who would give us reassurance that after these pandemic lockdowns are over and after the service industry and most other employment opportunities are destroyed, we would find someone who would put us back to work. We chose the one we chose. And as soon as that election ended, in the past 20 months, he has traveled out of this country 62 times. That is one country every week, 3 times a month. He has not been here for the majority of his first round of presidency. How can he understand what the feeling on the ground is when he is busy on every other part of the world except where people were locked in their houses, seated, trying to find a way to eat day by day, and the day that they come out of their houses, the person that they chose to help them maneuver this crisis is nowhere to be found. He and the government that he is with are not connected to the people. People told him they would protest in numbers. The triggers were there. The time bomb was ticking. From the time the lockdowns were lifted, we needed someone who would steer the ship back to survival. He got into presidency, he removed the fuel levy, inflation skyrocketed, he was not here. And by the time he's come back, it is only the overreaction of calling the army, whose work it is to also work outside the country and on the borders, to come back into the country together with him to take back control. This was a time bomb that would have been stopped well before this day happened. And
right.
I do not believe that the KDF are the right reaction to show that you are trying to connect with the people who are saying you've not been there for them.
All right. So then there's a question to you. So what then do you make of the ruling this evening by Judge Mugambi?
The judiciary, I'm a lawyer. We are all part of this constitution, the laws that carry us and everything else. The judiciary's job is not to choose sides. The judiciary's job is to take the balance on what is happening on the ground and what action the country and the government has taken and find a middle ground. There was definitely some misactivities that happened on Tuesday. Yes, the court does not agree entirely that the only way this country will operate now is with tanks on the street on a daily basis. They said, fine, to stop the riots or the protests today from leading into a riot, you can have your military for today. You can have them for tomorrow. We will give you time to organize yourselves, come up with a plan, but you cannot indefinitely decide Kenya is now no longer a police state and has become an army state. The work of the judiciary is to look at both sides, find a middle, ask everyone to go back to the table, discuss, and find a way out of the armistice.
Right.
And that is what the justice did today.
Right. Mr. Khamasi, I saw you shaking your head and making faces while you were speaking. Could you tell me what thoughts went through your mind?
You know, Victor, sometimes as a nation, we need to look at things very objectively. Because what I feel is we are at a point where instead of looking at things objectively, we are looking at things with emotions. And when the president makes a decision, in time, it is a problem. When the president, like a case in scenario, you saw the case of the finance bill. Yes, there was agitation on the streets. The president acknowledged it. But this particular bill was not on the president's desk. Let us face it. There is law in this country, and he's a lawyer. There is a procedure that is followed. And when it got to his table, he made the wise decision that a president will do. He withdrew the bill, and he sent back the recommendation to the speaker. I have heard people saying, emotionally, throwing words left, right, and center, just to fuel the situation in a country that is already in a mess. You get me? There was young people who demonstrated, and we appreciate the fact that these young people came out and expressed themselves in a very genuine manner. Something that is commendable. But again, if you look on the other side, now, the case of the finance bill, the president sends it back to parliament. As a law-abiding country, that was the object of the demonstration from the Generation Z. This particular object, the president has said, I have heard you, and I have withdrawn it. And the procedures have to follow to finality. But now you hear...
At this point, just allow me to ask you, at this point, and I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, there are those who feel that perhaps, like he's saying, the signs were there, the writing was on the wall quite early. Why wait until this juncture to respond? And there are those who are saying, including some of the questions that are coming here, is that the president had, the way he was able to whip his MPs around and withdraw all the amendments and basically send the bill back, why wasn't he able to do that, to marshal them to do that earlier?
Victor, let me ask. Can you withdraw something? Can you withdraw something that is not on your table? Remember, the Parliament of Kenya is an independent institution. True or false? Very true, right? So this is a process that started in Parliament. It went through all the processes. And as a country, we have law-abiding leadership. And that is the truth. Let us move away from the sideshows and the pains that we feel and everything. Let us face the law. And this particular document, if the president uttered a word and to say, to command Parliament to withdraw that particular bill before it gets to his table, what will have happened? The same people would have come out to say, look, the president is interfering with the independence of Parliament. Is that the case the president wants to get himself into? No. He acted in a record speed time because he got that particular bill in the morning, and at 4 o'clock, he addressed the nation.
Somebody's
Why?
asking,
and then another thing, Victor.
Somebody is actually asking you directly.
Yes.
Somebody called Juicy. He says, are you from this country? Was it necessary for blood to be shed for something to be done? This is a question to you directly.
There was no necessity for blood to be shed. That is unacceptable. And in a democratic country, that is completely unacceptable. But again, as a country, we need to follow the due process. Yes, there is the right to protest. There's no one who has limited that right. That is why on Thursday, on Thursday, when the bill was being debated on the floor of the House, people demonstrated. No one infiltrated the Parliament, and the Parliament did its job. The parliamentarians who have been elected by the people, they voted in that House. Yes, there have been claims of corruption, of bribery, and all those claims. And I believe that those claims are supposed to be taken care of because these are leaders who have been elected by the people, not to represent their own interests. And as a country, I believe it gets to a point where it bounces back to us as voters. Who do we vote for? Do we vote for these leaders who have the substance to represent our ideologies? Because what we have seen, Victor, what is happening in this nation is, I come to the voter with a lot of money, and I tell them, look, vote for me, I'm going to protect you. But when they get to Parliament, they want to recover that money that they were giving you as a voter. So this is a challenge. It bounces back to us as Kenyans, as voters, as the decision makers, because whatever we saw in Parliament is garbage in, garbage out. We vote in bad leaders, we get bad leadership in Parliament.
All right. I see your point. I just want you to put a pin on that for a second. You did say something quite significant, and I want you to pick up on this. We're a law-abiding country, a country that respects and follows the rule of law. So, for the sake of the viewers out there, there's been a lot of questions here. I know people are asking, okay, so what does this mean now? Now that the president has sent it back. I believe the two of you saw the piece that went on air a few minutes ago, and there's one person who's actually saying, look, there appears to be a bit of monkey business here. Sending it back, what does that mean? It can pass, if nothing is done within 14 days and so on. Help us understand, okay, so the bill has been sent back to Parliament with recommendations to scrap off all the clauses in totality, and the National Assembly Speaker has received it, acknowledged it. What next? Help us understand what next. Kenyans need to know what next after this. What does this mean? Is the bill out on a technicality, or is it going to come back? Talk to us a little bit about that.
This is the third of 3 bills introduced in the past years, including the housing bill that was there last year that was also its own animal, but this, I guess, was the nail that broke the camel's back. There is a bill that went through the House and was assented. All that is left now is a signature that signs this bill into law. If this bill is not signed into law within 21 days of today, or of the day it was passed, that is, it then goes and automatically becomes a law. This bill has to be returned to Parliament, and during a parliamentary session, withdrawn. And Parliament, it seems, unless a special sitting is called within the 21-day period, this bill still becomes law. That is very clear. And I feel like, pardon my senior over here, we are missing the message of what happened this week and last week.
What is the message from where you sit?
The past 2 years, the president has tried to push his agenda by raising taxes. And all that everyone is trying to pass across as clearly as possible, that keeps bringing us back to this watershed moment is increase the tax base. The tax base is the people who work. The more people who work, the more people can provide to themselves, to their family, to their country, to their government. There is no one working since the pandemic. We people who are lawyers and doctors are now DJs on TV doing their mixes like Grouchy and the rest. People who were in different careers had to reorganize themselves from the top way down to the bottom. This is a reorganized tax base, and it is much smaller than it was pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, everyone was moving. The country was a star. It was channeling money in, money out. At this juncture, we need the government to understand that the tax base, the people who need to be at work are not working. That is why there is such a number unseen before in this country, able to hit 35 counties in one afternoon, not because they are not busy, because they are not busy, right? These people need to go back to work. So the agenda of the Kenya Kwanza government needs to change. He's already at the halfway point of his first term. If he continues trying to tax the few of us who are there, who can pay taxes, we will pay 3/4 of our money, but 3/4 of the population will not live on us. The other 3/4 of the population need to be recovered from the 2020, 2021, and 2022 chaos, put back into a system of what, this was the hustler movement. This was the message. Let's get back to work. That work has never appeared. And that is why when you say tax us, we have nothing to tax. We have nothing to give. We cannot give. Give us something to do. We make something small, we give you what we have. We don't have it now. And the more you ask us to go and discuss a finance bill that raises taxes, it forgets the entire side of the population who are already below the poverty line. Kenya has had a poverty line issue, the whole of the time the country has existed. Can you imagine what that poverty line issue became now once the whole country had to go home at 3 p.m.? That is the problem.
All right, Mr. Mogaka and Mr. Khamasi, here's a question. Some of the questions that are also coming in. Here's a question. Where do we go from here? I believe all of us were watching the scenes in Parliament. All of us were watching when the reports of the deaths started coming in. All of us watched the first speech and the second speech and the Deputy President's speech. All of us have seen the protests and the demos today. We've seen the young person in Ongata Rongai who just lost their lives, and a body pumped full of bullets. We've also seen the calls for action. We've seen calls for peace. We've seen calls for dialogue and calls for all manner of solutions and approaches. From where you sit, gentlemen, which way Kenya? Which way do we go from here? Mr. Khamasi.
Thank you so much, Victor. Which way Kenya? I'll start by just describing what leadership is. To us, leadership is a critical calling, Victor. And as a country, the leaders that we have, they should note that that responsibility is bestowed on them by our God and the people who vote. Therefore, in everything they do, they need to be very careful and act with utmost selflessness as they execute the mandate that has been given upon them. The president has stretched a hand of dialogue. The young people have pushed their agenda forward and they have made their voice heard. So as a country, how do we move forward? The president should honor his word of dialogue. Engage everyone. And this boils down to public participation. In this country, public participation is enshrined in our constitution. But do we genuinely do public participation in this country? Because if we genuinely do public participation, then whatever has happened in this country will not be there. And who is mandated with this public participation? It is the parliament, the people's representative. Do they do it genuinely? They don't. And for me, where I sit as a Kenyan and as a leadership person, I feel like as a nation, moving forward, let us take seriousness the part of public participation that is enshrined in our constitution, Victor, Because not only at that point is as a country we are going to forge forward with inclusivity. Because what we have seen, it is not the older people who have gone to the streets, it is the young people. And yes, honestly speaking, the young people have been avoided or have been excluded at the table where decisions are made in this country.
So
not yesterday. Moving forward is, as a government of Kenya Kwanza, I believe the president listens, and moving forward, let him reconstitute the government and include young people in these particular spaces.
On that point,
yes.
On that point, and I want you to jump in on this after you finish your response to this. There are a number of suggestions, a number of demands that have been put forward.
Yes.
One of them is that the president needs to actually do away with parliament, dissolve it completely, constitute the IEBC and enable the recall of some, first of all, reconstitute the IEBC, enable recalling of members of parliament, but also there are other calls for just complete scrapping of this entire leadership. Where do you stand on this?
Victor, on that one, I'll be a bit objective. As a country where we are we able to go to an election right now? Not possible. What is the quality thing that is supposed to be done? And I like the suggestions. Yes, the president to constitute the IEBC. We cannot have an IEBC appointed in the next 1 month and we have an election in the next 3 months. It is not possible. The infrastructure needed is not a walk in the park. So there are things that are possible and there are things that are not possible. So as a country, I believe the object of recalling, we also need to look at the visibility of this particular proposal that we have, Victor. Because honestly, right now, a country needs a parliament that is objective. We are in a state as a country where if we don't have legislations being passed that are pro-people, where are we going to go as a country? You break the parliament. Then what? Does that solve the real problem? It doesn't solve the real problem. So what we need to do as a nation, let us go into a rethinking mode. Let us reevaluate ourselves. Let us reevaluate how we pick our leaders, how we elect them. And then 2027, use your vote to make the right decision, not at this moment.
Mr. Mogaka, he believes that's the way forward. Where do you stand on this? Some of the proposals by some of the protesters are what I've said before. Scrap the entire government, let's start afresh. Which way, Kenya, from where you said?
President Ruto is not one man. He is his advisors. He is the people he surrounds himself with. He is the people he consults before he speaks. If he has been doing so on his own, as he did when he called young Kenyans criminals who are treasonous, and then changed tune within 15 hours and told them our sons and our daughters, the circle that he is with must change. Those people don't know us. Clearly, there is a connect between government and people. The person who is on the street who sells me a tomato and the person who wields power at the top must be able to feel each other. We have felt every president since independence, and we will always be able to connect with our leaders. There is a problem and the buck stops with him. He gets to decide who and who doesn't. President Ruto is not a monolith. He was a young Turk. He was a man from the street. He knows what these problems are. There is blood on every street in Nairobi and other parts of this country. Empathy should have been the first reaction. Whoever advised him to go and attack as a form of defense failed. Failed him,
so
failed everyone.
You think we need, the president needs
our leaders
different advisors?
Need to stop everything that they're doing now and listen. Respond with empathy to the people who keep saying the same things repetitively. Have a prayer breakfast. Say, we are sorry this happened. Extrajudicial killings have occurred. This is primary to us. The young children who were killed on the streets in Rongai, in town, in Narok, in Eldoret, this needs to be addressed immediately. The protests need to be reformed and returned to be peaceful. He should allow picketing. The conversation that he has said has begun. He should protect it and make sure it's allowed to continue. People being heard by their leaders, allow those leaders the will to rule. That is number one, sovereignty of the people. The will of the people gives them the right to rule. And if the president continues reacting to whatever is happening on the street instead of being proactive and foreseeing whatever we are going to do, because right now we are finished with this week. What happens next Tuesday? No one is discussing. No one knows. The military will not be in town forever. We will come back. We will not come back. This depends on who is talking to us and how they are communicating to us. And if it is the way they have been doing so, expect the same result. It is insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different.
All right. Now, gentlemen, we need to, this is a massive conversation. We only have so much time to deal with this. But I would like both of you to formulate a message to the country, a message to the leaders, a message to the people that are out there. Each of you separately. As you craft that, let me just read some of the comments that have come in. Christopher Joga, you're watching from Kabete, thank you so much. Someone says, lawyer Khamasi, you say the president was not at fault because the document was not in his table. Stop giving us, that's Emmy. Emmy is really, really upset with you as we try to wind up. Somebody called Juicy says, well, the government is pointing fingers at each other. And are you sure about the independence of the parliament? We need to dissolve it. These are the views of some of the people. Dr. Ralph Mwai says, do we need to wait for people to die so we can talk about things? We should have opportunities for youth delegates. That's Dr. Ralph Mwai. Brian from Keroka says the president needs to withdraw the bill. Well, he has. We don't have jobs, which is what you were saying, Mr. Mogaka. Somebody else here by the name of Mureithi says, what next? I believe, Mureithi, your question has been answered. And Jerry from Kitengela says, I think your question about the bill turning into law after 21 days has been responded to. And he says, Jerry says, I mean, if this happens, if it automatically turns into law, the Gen Z will be back on the streets harder, fiercer than ever. That's Jerry from Kitengela. And finally, I mean, they're coming in quick and fast. Robert Obaha, you say the deployment of KDF was the biggest mistake. Robert from Kakamega. And Kefa from Kitengela is asking, why is it taking so long to reform the IEBC? Anyway, good people, the questions are many, the points are many. It's a massive conversation, one that will continue to be discussed even for decades to come. This is one for the history books. But for this moment, this juncture, gentlemen, what's your message in brief, concise? That's your camera. What's your message to the people, to the leadership, and to those who are watching right now? That's your camera. Real quick, Mr. Mogaka.
To all the Gen Zs, Gen X, Gen Ys, Gen Alphas, and everyone else, to our leaders and to the young people, Kenya loves you, and you love Kenya. Kenya has moved past more than this, bigger than this. We've battled colonialism, coups, we have battled single democracy to multi-democracies. We have built highways, superhighways, SGRs. We have invited millions of white people, and we will invite millions more. Kenya is always going to be bigger than its problems, and we should know that we will triumph over this problem as well. Kenya will always overcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mogaka. Mr. Khamasi, there's your camera. Message to the people.
Dear Kenyans, we only have one country called Kenya. We have all our freedoms and rights enshrined in our constitution. How we exercise them determines how productive they will be. For as a country, the young generation, including myself, we have expressed ourselves through the protests. The leadership of the country has listened to us. Let us give dialogue an opportunity. And those taking advantage of the situation, just know that your days are numbered. And at the right time, those who did right will be judged right, and those who did wrong will be judged wrong. Let us focus on rebuilding a nation. We can no longer sustain protests every single day. Thank you.
All right, good people. We would like to take a break on this conversation. Like we said, it's a massive conversation happening all across the country. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. Can't thank you enough. Asanteni sana. And thank you for your insights tonight. Good people of Kenya, as you go to bed tonight or wherever it is you're going tonight, may God bless you, may God keep you, and may you stay in peace even as we find our way forward for our country and our people. My name is Victor Muyakane. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to present this news to you tonight. Good night.